moving into our assisted living community in anticipation of their physical decline.
But you got to be careful because if you have any assets.
Oh no, they're doing this in a way that's constructive.
Yeah, you got to do it. You got to put your stuff into
And I have done
right. And that's why they're doing it so they're not having to start to do it. So basically, so they're restructuring their lives. And this assisted living has a progressive care system. First, you've got a condo. And your condo just happens to be in this place. But it has progressive care. And you can either move it. So either relocate to some care if you need it, all the way up to have a couple of really high years of they're making a full-time salary and doing this and they're paying them money up front. They're basically selling their house, buying into this program. And they say it's their children. That's why they're doing it to protect their children from having to move in. Which is, I do have to hear, we moved over 18 years ago to Texas A&M.
Like you also look at the architecture and climate change.
Part of that rise or issues
I'm here because my faculty was Spain, you work
Especially the trees.
So you wanted to do
When you try to compile everything,
Hi, thank you, Marty.
What specific structure?
I cited like a couple of different criteria, right? Like how social capital is not first how resources natural and then another one about
I work in maximum of information and also what kind of infrastructure we have to do that. But previously of that, as you know,
That's fine. We can invite you up. Start this conversation. You guys enjoy your afternoon.
You too.
Okay.
Curtis,
First time we have a
stay
master
safe.
with
Say
housing,
that. It's been working with so many.
whereas
It's a crazy world.
and one that doesn't want to give one column we have all the vulnerabilities, and in another column we have
That's,
all
we have
the
like,
vision
there is
of the
no
community
population
to improve the economic skills, infrastructure, housing.
Yes.
Is that still ongoing?
I'm looking for
Do you have published work about it or stuff online or something? 'Cause I'd love to read more.
Well, we're in our first
I'm only doing that work. You're almost from it.
They're all trained, they're all good to go, they're some of the first contact.
Yes, I have done like a report.
Like even California, for example. I feel like California is screwed up.
I don't have a car, but I
Yes.
But it didn't have specific
could
requirements
do,
for the system.
and if you are looking, for example, if you are looking for money, because the is involved with me.
Hey there.
As local and students. When I was there, I was working in all the university. Then it came to
That's what I'm looking for right
I
now.
was working with the master for the, then I was there
Right.
practically working.
But it will be if.
6 days, and before the people we could do some work together.
And what work? Surveys?
No, I have done what I do is mapping.
Perfect, because we're gonna talk about
So
that.
like a round
So
table?
if you
No,
remember.
no, I map.
Okay.
I do maps.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So you walk the city then?
No, I we do a little bit.
Where are you located? Oh, you know, okay, so you're, yeah, okay.
For me as an expert, I need 2 weeks to go there, to feel that, and what I do is I ask them to tell all of the local tribal.
And you went to them one-on-one or they all?
Very complete. I have 70 people working 2 hours. And the 40 students are doing notes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and then we have a lot of work done.
Is there anything particular DOE?
Yes, for example, you need to, what are the most vulnerable houses?
Yeah.
Then they can say here, 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 and then you as an go. You cannot do all these labs.
How big is this one?
I can say.
So a physical.
It's the city of Ibagué. Ibagué.
Where's Bill Change?
I learned this methodology because I'm working
Yeah, yeah.
also it sounds interesting.
You know Dr. Robert?
With our board. But yeah, so
Yeah, I work with that.
it looked like there's like one girl. Doctors without borders.
Very well respected by the Haudenosaunee. But she's the director of the Center for Native Peoples and the Environment.
What I thought
She
was
What are the
teaches
main
ecological
challenges and also what are the main
She's
visions of them to repair.
she's a United Nations speaker.
And then we could start to get more
I'd
funding.
like to get her
Focus on this.
involved and connected
Like
to.
specific housing.
Yeah, houses or infrastructure.
So when you're saying you're not vulnerabilities, is that like demographic vulnerabilities or the infrastructure? Okay. So like you're near the like rivers and stuff.
How many houses are good condition, normal condition, very bad condition, you have. It's a first, very first approach because this case, you have to travel 2 afternoons, 4 hours.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I don't know her, but I know she did.
I do, they invite me, what we have done is they invite me to do a lecture. And then I say, no, I will not come to a lecture, I will come. I could do a lecture, but we have to do a workshop. And also I have to prepare the students.
You know, we've been very fortunate.
And I work 2 days with the preparing them
Such
for
a
worship.
the hub and show.
And then we work with the community and set up with the was like an extra credit. Yes, it was like an extra credit.
And you still see this as the like.
Some of us have.
Okay, thank you so much. That's fine.
Like,
That-
when you were looking back over the notes, and you're like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, because I asked to.
Should we start doing our
Yes.
circle?
To award a report.
We talked about yesterday, equitable, if I do a control find. Everything. I mentioned, organization.
Can they all go on the
Yeah, I was trying to have us when we're all sitting so people can see them. Well, unfortunately, those.
Was a problem putting them on? Was there a problem putting them on? I thought you wouldn't be able to see them on there, but you can see them.
Okay.
I think you can, right? Is it see through too much? A little bit.
Thank you.
It's more about the side.
Good luck.
We'll try 1 year left.
Decide before I sat down.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
I just saw that way, we have different races.
Well, there was just a session that used this material.
Yeah, thank.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I always feel like yeah, this was a really big cohort, which is awesome.
That's it here? No, she asked me all over the
And then we had.
Did you tell her about the correlation stuff matching?
Power method is like a person right
It's another.
and then you know
Everything's like exactly the same there, the same number of equity points and fees. So it must be that. God forbid.
Yeah, well, and it seems like a program now.
In order to, pass the paper system and now it's all apps.
Okay, sounds good.
As a survey onto following up on that one section.
We can go.
So I'm gonna use all the video scraps for them to finish.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, I'll see you in like an hour.
What?
1.5. See you.
They showed that this is actually got to go.
No worries.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'd love to show
Pero esa que tocaba decir es que más se acabó. Pateco. Claro, sí, no quiero decir pateco tú. No, que hay una foto de pateco que tiene una sí, yo no quiero
I know what you mean. I know exactly what you had to be. That's what you were saying. We don't have any time.
La prima a veces le pagaban, era abogado, pagaban un poco en gallina, pero ellos decían y hay una marca que puede ser esa fue la marca que yo me compraba y lo entregó. Cada loco estaba exacto. Parece que el cuidado de algún punto me pagó con yegua. Estaba adelantado. O si el chelo del punto, o sea, por decir no me digo que va a cash. Está bien, Claro, exacto. Después llévate 25 más. Edificio, sabiendo que es un arquitecto del Museo de Voz. Eso es otra cosa. Es que es muy interesante, ¿no? Un tema frío. Que pasa es que te y la verdad que me gusta.
Let's give it a couple more minutes.
Yo pensando que digo, mi área, por ejemplo,
These are the people on the hot seat. Buenas tardes. Yeah. Okay, so we aren't going to do introductions again because we want to get right into it, but I would like to ask if is there anybody new here today that wasn't here yesterday? Okay. Would you mind introducing yourselves real quick, just who you are and what agency or organization you're with?
I'm Neil Stewart. I'm with the National Weather Service here in Albany, New York.
Oh, great. Hi.
I'm Maris Torres Rivera. I'm Executive Director at a nonprofit in Puerto Rico that provides legal aid. It's called Fundación Fondo de Acceso a la Justicia.
Okay, great. Welcome. Anybody else?
Behind you.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I'm Adrian Wall. I'm an associate professor at Mercy College.
Okay, great. My name is Mark Lichtenstein. I'm from SUNY ESF.
You got your service.
Okay, so we just want to revisit what we did brainstorming yesterday. It was kind of unstructured. Some people were okay with that. Some people were like, we need a little more structure. That's good. That's okay. It was just open brainstorming. Our task yesterday was to define our mission and goals for our cohorts, our groups, and we agreed yesterday that's basically public service, so agencies, government agencies, so public service, the civil society, NGOs, so community organizations and other organizations, other civil society organizations, and indigenous populations. Those are the three groups that we are representing. We are feeding into the broader RISE platform. I thought Valerie Lizatis did a nice job today talking about that. So we'll be feeding in with the other cohorts and eventually come up with some kind of RISE platform or strategic plan, whatever you want to call it, planning kind of guidance document. So we are talking about how can we better serve and feed into universities, and how can universities better engage with those sectors that I talked about. And this is about accelerating movement towards issues like climate change, for instance. So yesterday we were brainstorming about what our mission and goals are. We decided we weren't going to craft a mission statement, because if any of you have been involved in crafting mission statements, we could still be here talking about words. We also talked at lunch today. Mark helped us understand that without Marla and Cecilio really being involved with helping to think about a mission statement, since they're really the founders, it's kind of hard for us to be thinking that way. So some of us did get together during lunch today, Tom and others. I apologize for trying to figure out how we're going to communicate with those of you who offered to help. We just couldn't figure out how to do that. And we tried to sit at lunch, and then a few others broke away to take all the information that's up on these flip charts. And you're welcome to get up and look at this to refresh your memory on all the stuff that we brainstormed yesterday. And try to think of, we're not going to do a mission statement, as Mark said, elements or actionable words or something that could feed into an eventual mission statement. So Oscar did a great job of capturing this. He's going to show you that in a minute. And we want to get your feedback on that. We would like to spend no more than 15-20 minutes on this, because we were supposed to do this yesterday. So let's get that done. And then we can move on to the task for today. So yesterday was to define mission and goals. So we're really talking about elements of the mission. And then Oscar today, can you just put the second slide up for today?
Yeah.
This week's. Today, we're supposed to talk about how do we achieve those goals? How do we achieve those things that we're gonna decide on as our outcomes? So Oscar's gonna spend more time talking us through this, but, so again, I was just saying, Oscar did a great job of taking what he heard over lunch and working with Tom and Mark and Kyra and Devin and a few others. Here's what he came up with if you wanna walk through it.
So basically, yesterday we touched a lot of the objectives, but it was kind of implicit and not so much explicit. So we took the creative liberty in weaving all the comments into these 6 main points for the mission statement or goals, right? So one thing that came out a lot was RISE as a platform to speak the truth and be transparent in that process. Be a voice of truth and a source of relevant and confidential information that you can, valga la redundancia, right, trust upon. And this must be accomplished by being inclusive of all different perspectives, sectors. One thing that was the first thing that came up, it should be accessible to everyone, including disabled, visually impaired people, people that speak different languages, you know, break down those barriers. So then we got RISE as a convener platform, which would provide forums, mediation, be like a translator for different communities so they could all understand each other and collaborate more efficiently. And with that, promote more capacity building. Fourth would be more efficient and effective at engaging organizations by reducing fragmentation. And this part was pretty vivid in our discussion yesterday, right? And with that, by reducing fragmentation, how could we also reduce the complexity of collaborating between different sectors? Then, one of the main points that has been throughout all the cohort sessions is how to redefine resiliency to it be more broad, but at the same time more specific to what these sectors are representing, who we represent, right? And so with that, be an educational bridge, university as a stakeholder that could latch on federal agencies, state governments, and locals with NGOs and geographical communities, right? And so, likewise, promote social justice, which is being equitable. Equity was a term that was mentioned quite a few times also yesterday. And well, then implementing effective and transparent mechanisms on how do we follow the money, for example. And so that would lead to successful recovery. On the lunch, we also spoke, heard Valerie mention some key terms, you know, how do we include uncertainty in this process and be, what Tom also mentioned, you know, which was contemplating the inclusiveness, but be flexible and sensitive to the different cultures that we as different sectors might be working with, right? So the objective for today, day 2, theory of change, would be taking this element, but before, I want to see if the group here agrees that this was what was, you know, talked about yesterday.
We wanted to try to stay with 5, because typically you don't want to be more than 5. We got 6. Again, it was hard, but what do you think? Did we capture, it wasn't intended to capture all the nuance of everything. We won't lose that. There are places that we can put the detail. We're trying to stay at like this higher level. So I think Oscar did a great job, and I know he has some assistance, but yeah, so feedback for Oscar on this?
So you think it's on point?
I just wanted to kind of like grasp overall what I got from yesterday.
Okay.
And I believe that a mission has to be intentional, specific, and it has to lead toward a goal to be accomplished in terms of conveying a commitment that would be measured, that would be evaluated, and could lead to action and continuity. Because if we want to get results, I think that we need to be clear in what are we looking for. What is our intention? what is the specific, who are we targeting into this? And if I heard yesterday that there were so many services from different agencies, federal, state, local, and there were agencies that were acknowledged and recognized, but there were other services that nobody know about. So I think that by being specific, we need to have like a sense of assessment of what is there and what is not. And I suggest that in order to have a better control of those resources or sources of help or assistance, we need to know what are those. And I think that people need to have accessibility to those resources, because by not knowing that, what we do is duplicate and repeat the same thing that someone else or other one are doing. Wasting money, wasting resources, wasting time. So I think that I have some ideas of what would fit into what.
Okay.
I don't know if I should read it here or read it to you, copy, or I don't know. But that's basically what I was thinking about.
First of all, Kyra brought up the need to better understand what services, models, data is out there. So I think we will be sure that we highlight that as well. But do you think there's anything that we could add to this list that would address some of what you just said?
I think that one of the things, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, well, I think that one of the things that we talked about at lunch is that what Rice is doing and still doing is developing a process. You know, that includes what she's talking about and what we're doing all here, not necessarily finished. And we're still gathering information, so it does have to gather information, analyze, and produce. This is a step in it that includes elements of all that, but I think Rice is basically developing a process and maybe even a research angle to that. But
then maybe 7 could be integrate with existing frameworks and facilitate connections to those and share knowledge about those frameworks at multiple levels of governance.
Can you say that?
So integrate with the existing frameworks and facilitate, say, educator and practitioner connection to those frameworks at the federal, state, local level, but not necessarily excluding frameworks outside of government, but that's just my instinct where to start, since that is a mechanism of control for funding and continued staffing so that we actually continue all these conversations in a direct way.
I'm sorry, I forgot first.
Evelyn.
I think the answer to one of your questions is I would love to get
Sure.
the detail, but you don't need to give me now before we leave. But
sure.
I want to be sure before we do that, though, that people are accurately kind of reframing what you said.
Right.
So is there anything that you would like to reflect on? I mean, are we starting to capture it a little bit here?
Right. And I think that part of that mission has to, if not that, at least on the line of empowering, to empower the recipient and the providers of services in need during disaster. And how are we going to do that? By,
Wait a minute, restate that again, because I thought that was a powerful statement.
okay, I said to empower the recipients and the services providers and providers of the services needed in disasters.
So just Oscar term, change, empower recipients.
To empower the recipients
and the
providers of
service.
services needed
Providers
in
of-
disaster, and then we could go to how by doing this and this and that.
Hold on the house,
Okay.
because that's what we actually need to move to today, so
Okay.
hold on that, so,
Okay.
great. Tom?
So 2 things. One, it gets more towards well, it's a question, I guess, and a comment or idea, if we go in the direction of this RISE network, then can the network be the trusted source for information and also process elements that get us to somewhere else?
So that's an open-ended question.
Well, I'm just saying it's putting a label kind of on
Okay.
what this entity may become. So.
Are you asking for feedback?
Well, I guess what I'm thinking of is we want to avoid, what I think exists now is, well, we can turn to this group and we can turn to that group, we can turn to this group, and there are about 11 groups or something we can turn to, and they all have elements of great information and tools and processes, but they're not necessarily integrated and talking to one another. So if RISE can bring all of those entities together to become the trusted source that anybody who's interested in working in this area wants to turn to, that's where some of these other process elements happen, like finding out who's doing what, making a matrix of who needs what, who has what services, vetting participants, all those kinds of things. So that's
I'd like to stay on this for a minute because.
Well, so that's my, can I say that, that's the one thing, and the other part is.
But before I move on,
yeah, okay.
can I reflect on that?
Let this
And I'm gonna go back to
Don't
you.
forget what I'm thinking, yeah.
Oh, go for it then, because I won't forget because I've got it written down right here. So.
The other thing is that I'm kind of a planning process nerd, so there's mission, goals, objectives, actions, outcomes, all of those kinds of things. And so when we get down to integrating with existing frameworks, that's more of it's an action or it could be objective. The difficulty with this is depending on a few different words exchanged, one's a goal, one's an objective. Oh, you switch it, now it's a goal. But objectives are measurable. Goals are less measurable, but they are attainable. And missions are not necessarily measurable. They're the future state that we'd like to see. What's the future look like? And so I know that's too much for us all.
No, it's not. Actually, I really appreciate you saying that
But
because
that's kind of the nerdy side of all.
Well, this is kind of messing with me too. We're trying to operate under a structure that was presented to us by others.
Sure.
So we're trying to facilitate, and I'm not saying it's bad or good. It's just we're trying to facilitate.
Yeah, and I'm
the
not trying to
structure.
diminish what's been said. I'm just
No,
saying,
so that's why we've been playing with these words.
Things about it like that. Yeah.
That's why we're playing with like using the words elements because we know what to go back and pull things out and say, oh, that's a goal. No, that's really an objective.
Okay, yeah.
That's a part of the mission statement, but you're absolutely right about that. All right, so back to your first comment.
Okay.
This was a question I wanted to pose for you all. One of our colleagues that was with us yesterday, who I respect highly, was listening to the lunch presentation today, which she thought was great. But she said, I'm going to read exactly what she said. I'm confused. It seems like there's too many cooks in the kitchen. Everyone wants to be the one who figures it out. Everyone wants to lead. So what you're asking us is an important question. There's a perception, is RISE just trying to be just another entity that is trying to fix something, and what is it that they're trying to fix? Or is it, or can it become this broader place that's trusted to be that conduit? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I guess in my mind I was thinking if it can be the convener of all of the different entities that do have both the services and expertise, but it also includes those that need those services. So it's multiple things, really. But the community that's involved can be that trusted source, the place to turn to.
All right, so can we stay on reflecting on Tom's question, and then we'll go to new ideas. Go here and then we'll go here.
Quickly, I just wanted to reflect on what Catherine said yesterday, and I think it's important. Some of us may have gotten, all of us may have gotten, but it's about the ESFs, and I don't want to go too quickly to a federal solution. I think it's really important that we're looking at this at a much more local level. But in all of our planning and looking at what ESF is actually doing that, and we have long-term recovery, which, as Catherine mentioned yesterday, has been memorialized into ESF 14.
Which is emergency support function.
Emergency support function.
Not the college.
Yeah, so that's, I think, an important reference as we begin to build out, and that as we begin becoming the clearinghouse for, has that already been done, that we also have a federal counterpart.
Okay. And I got over here and I got over here, but I want us to also stay on reflecting on what Tom said. Do we think RISE can be this trusted source? So we'll go over here and we'll go over here.
I think just a recognition of many of the things that we've been hearing over the last 2 days are issues that actually pre-exist in communities. The resource there are people who are lacking resources even before disaster. So I think including those organizations who already do this work and recognizing that these organizations are going to be doing this work after RISE is gone and that this is going to be substantial and for a long period of time is really, really important creating this matrix, because before a disaster, there are people who are lacking resources being helped by organizations, and a disaster comes, groups come in, and then they leave, and then sometimes you're a step back from where your community is a step back.
That's really important. We didn't bring that up yesterday. So like groups like All Hands of Hearts or Nachama or St. Bernard's Parish, SVP, or others, right? That is
Just recognizing and making sure that when RISE or whatever the conglomerate is gets up and leaves, it doesn't leave a hole. It leaves those organizations ready to go forward with the work.
Did you get that? Because I think that's an important.
I'm having trouble paraphrasing.
I think somebody did it perfectly, which was
Capacity building.
for
But-
pre-existing organizations.
Okay, but you're also talking about bringing those organizations into the fold as
You
well.
have to bring them into the
Yes,
fold,
we
and
didn't
then
talk about that yesterday.
when you leave, make sure they're stronger than they were before.
Can we just tweak the
Not
notes
weaker.
a little bit to reflect that too, because the mention of emergency support function or ESF is specifically 14 on that emergency support function, so that's emergency support function 14. And that is exactly the federal mechanism for addressing what he's talking about as far as aggregating all of those individualized efforts. Community,
And I'm just gonna add that we're having this same conversation that the National Extension Disaster Education Network